Now, it's Boomer Life, lifestyle discussion designed to make your life more engaging, meaningful, and complete. Celebrating the baby boomer generation, this is Boomer Life on CIL 650.
Can't you hear the pounding of my heartbeat? 'Cause you're the one I love. You're the one I love.
The song is called Can't You Hear My Heartbeat? A little Herman's Hermits music to kick off this round of Boomer Life here on CIL 650. I'm Sterling Fox, joined in studio by audiologist Dr. Ted Venema from NextGen and Mainland Hearing Centers. Welcome back, Dr. Ted.
Hey, good to be here.
It's good to have you with us. Of course, we're going to talk about hearing and hearing aids and all sorts of solutions to hearing issues over the next hour with an audiologist. So we start off by asking you, sir, what exactly is an audiologist?
An audiologist is very odd, very weird indeed.
Okay.
An audiologist is like an optometrist, but for the ear.
Mm-hmm.
An audiologist tests hearing, an audiologist prescribes hearing aids. So all the stuff, all the good stuff that an optometrist would do for the eye, an audiologist does for the ear.
Okay. What's that? Now, you would just come back from Halifax. You were there just a few days ago.
Yeah.
And you were speaking to a group of practitioners. Those people are called hearing instrument practitioners.
That's right.
They have a big maritime conference, and you were one of the featured speakers out there just a few days ago.
Yeah.
So what's the difference, Dr. Ted, between an audiologist and a hearing instrument practitioner?
That's a good question. A hearing instrument practitioner is to an audiologist what an optician is to an optometrist.
Okay.
They both fit lenses. The optometrist has a university degree, whereas the optician has a college diploma.
Okay.
But they're both in the same arena. And they're both, the optician usually takes a prescription and fits it. Okay, the prescription is what the optometrist does.
Right.
The optician will fit it. Now, the hearing instrument practitioner isn't just limited to fitting hearing aids. A hearing instrument practitioner, unlike the optician, can also test hearing.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, what makes them different from each other, though, is that the audiologist can test infants and children. The audiologist can work more with ear, nose, and throat doctors to do brainwave type of testing and stuff like that for a little bit more of a sleuth-like process to figure out where is the site of lesion, a tumor or whatever.
Right, okay.
But both, when it comes to the mainstream adult population with hearing loss, you can see either a hearing instrument practitioner or an audiologist. Both will do a hearing test. Both will prescribe hearing aids.
So you flew across the continent a few days ago. You sat down in front of a room full of hearing instrument practitioners in Halifax.
Yeah.
What did you tell them? What did they want to know? Especially, we'll talk first about the nature of your speech.
Yeah.
And I'm always curious about the Q&A, the questions and answers that follow. So what did you talk to them about?
I gave them a pack of lies. No, I talked to them about the middle ear.
Okay.
The three little bones behind the eardrum, and a test called tympanometry, which is tympanum is drum, and it's a neat little test to test the status of your middle ear. Do you have an infection behind your eardrum? You can do this quick little test. It takes like 3 minutes, and it's done. And so I was explaining the procedures of tympanometry to them.
So is this fairly new then?
Actually, it's been around for a few decades, but a lot of people haven't been using it in their offices when they should.
Oh, okay. So the idea now is to get everybody on the same page and executing the test in similar fashion.
Yep.
So once you do the speech, you always invite questions.
Yep.
So what did the hearing instrument practitioners want to know from the guy from BC?
Well, they wanted to know, like why should you do that test? And that was pretty easy to explain, really. In a hearing test, like doctors or medicine does, you always use a battery of tests.
Right.
You never rely on one test.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're pure tone testing, you're testing the person with headphones and you find a hearing loss. And then you do another test called what we call bone conduction, and we put sound through the back of the ear. We put a little thing like a headband on the head, and it delivers sound through the back of the ear, like on the bone. When you put your finger behind your ear, you feel that round bone.
Right.
It's called your mastoid bone, and you deliver tones through that. And we compare how you heard that way compared to how you heard through the headphone. And if there's a big difference, it means you might have a middle ear problem.
Interesting.
Well, why don't you back that up with tympanometry? Quick a second, snicker snack, get her done, and prove it.
And the test only takes a matter of minutes to conduct.
It's really short.
Okay.
So I was encouraging them because some of them hadn't been trained in tympanometry in their school or education. Some have, but it's rusty. So I was refreshing and advocating and extolling the virtues.
Interesting stuff. You know, I'm thinking of early days of radio, and we used to see this in the 70s in that show Laugh In.
Yeah.
They had a guy named Gary Owens who was the show announcer, and Gary would imitate early radio guys. And I'm going back to this bone behind the ear thing that you were talking about a few minutes ago, because back in the early days of radio, and you'll still see musicians particularly doing it these days, the trick was you cupped your hand behind your ear, and that effectively became a headset.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have a headset in many situations.
Yeah.
So what you could do was you cup your hand behind your ear, and that gave you a sense of what you sounded like. Now, what does that have anything to do with the bone thing behind your ear?
Well, in some ways it does. I'll say it this way. Yeah, I think it does. The way you hear your own voice is different from the way others hear you.
Absolutely.
So when you listen to a tape recording of your voice, you're going, "Ooh, is that me?" And everybody says, "Yeah, that sounds just like you," and you're the only one who thinks it doesn't.
That's right.
And you know why? It's because when you talk, you're hearing yourself through bone, the vibration of your own skull, as well as through sound waves coming out of your mouth going to your ears. So you hear yourself not only through air conduction, sound waves, but you hear yourself talking also through the bone of your skull.
Interesting.
And that makes you sound more richer and deeper to yourself.
To yourself,
yeah,
of course,
you sound better to yourself than
the whole wide world.
Yeah.
Isn't
so
that
when you're
interesting?
listening to a tape deck or a recording of your voice, I'm dating myself, tape deck. But when you're listening to your recording of your own voice, you're the only one who thinks, "Ooh, that's me," and everybody says, "Yeah, it sounds just
Well, it's
like
interesting
you."
because here on Boomer Life, we have a lot of people who come in who aren't professional broadcasters, but who excel in their various professions and disciplines, and some of them. Because most of our guests on this program, like you and I are right now, Dr. Ted, we wear a headset with a little boom thing, like the guys on Hockey Night in Canada wear. That's what we wear on this show. But I can tell when someone comes into the show to do a show with us, the hearing of your own voice quite frequently throws people off. We're not accustomed to hearing ourselves as others hear us.
That's right. That's right.
And when you put on a headset, that's what you sound like to the rest of the world.
Yep.
And it really is distracting.
Yeah, it sounds thinner. It doesn't sound quite as, as rich. It doesn't have quite as much boom. Ordinary speech is about 65 decibels, like conversational speech 1 meter away from you, yakety, yakety, yak.
Right.
But you hear yourself around 80, 85.
Oh, okay.
Because you're hearing yourself through the air, through sound waves out of your mouth to your ears, but also through your skull.
Interesting.
Yeah, it
stuff.
is. It's weird. Hearing is interesting.
It is. It absolutely is. Now, with that in mind, I wanted to. I was wondering about the questions and answers at your speech in Halifax, because you sent along some interesting material since your last visit with us, and it's all about binaural hearing. And the subject of the piece, or the headline of the piece, is "Why do we have 2 ears?" You go on to point out that we mammals possess, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 hands, at least most of us, and, among many other examples, 2 ears. Yeah. So most of us know about this duplicity and this duality in our makeup, but why? Why do we have, how critical is 2 ears to successful hearing?
Right. I would say it's akin to having 2 eyes for successful vision. I mean, you can see with 1 eye.
Sure.
You can drive with 1 eye. You have 2 eyes in order to see depth. Otherwise, if you cover 1 eye, you're seeing as flat as a postcard. Now, your brain is fooling. I can do that right now looking at you, and I think, no, I still see depth, but that's just your brain fooling you. You really don't have depth perception with 1 eye.
Right.
You have 2 ears in order to hear the direction of sound. We have 2 ears actually for 3 reasons, and we can just one of them is called binaural summation. In English, 2 ears are better than 1.
Okay.
Directionality of hearing, you can't localize the direction of sound if you've got 1 ear. I've got a buddy in Kitchener, Ontario. I used to yell at him when he was in the woods. "Hey, how you doing? I'm over here." And he'd be yelling, "Shut up, Venema. You know I don't know where you are." He had only 1 ear.
Oh, really?
He only heard with 1 ear. So he could hear me.
Sure.
He just couldn't tell the direction.
Isn't that something?
Yep. And a third reason you have 2 ears is what they call the cocktail effect. You hear speech better in background noise with 2 ears than you do with 1.
Okay.
But just like with vision, if I've got only 1 eye, it doesn't mean I have a 50% vision loss. I can still see pretty good. You know?
Right.
And same with if you have only 1 ear to hear from, you haven't got a 50% hearing loss. So never think that. And then I'll explain more of that,
Okay.
as we go on. But yeah, two ears are mainly to tell the direction of sound.
Well, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Because last week, or last month, actually, Dr. Ted, when you were in here, we spent a great deal of time. You were most interesting describing your work as an audiologist and that of your colleagues in the testing of little children.
Yeah.
Which is, I would say, challenging to say the very least,
Yeah,
I'm sure,
it is.
but also fascinating
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
And one of the tests that you do with I'm assuming a normal hearing child, but a very young person,
Yeah, yeah.
is you sit them in a quiet, soundproof area with speakers on either side of the room,
Yep.
and you'll play a noise from one speaker or the other.
That's right.
And the child should turn in the general direction of the noise.
Yeah,
So that's
essentially, yep.
so that's the two ears
Yep.
providing that little listening person
Yep.
with a sense of where the sound is
Yep.
coming from.
That's right.
And so then you know that child is hearing.
Yep. And you're trying to make those sounds out of the speakers softer and softer until
Exactly.
the child no longer responds.
Right.
But you got to first set up a stimulus response paradigm. You got to reward the kid for looking, otherwise he's going to get bored.
But I guess what I'm having difficulty in understanding, even with your pal who couldn't figure out where you were yelling at him from, is how that works, how the one ear, how the two ears provide us with the ability to hear direction that only one ear hearing does not.
That's really
How does that work?
interesting. It's really cool. It's not like, oh, the right ear hears from the right and the left ear hears from the left. It's not that stupidly
Well,
simple.
thank you, Bullwinkle.
Yeah. I should make my face look like a moose when I say it.
That's very good.
Anyway, it's
But
not.
that's what a lot of us think,
I
Dr.
know,
Ted.
and the
That's a pretty popular urban myth.
I know, and the truth of it is way more elegant than
Okay.
that. Sound travels, at around, 1,200 kilometers an hour or something like that. It speeds along faster than a 747 with a tailwind.
Okay.
So, when sound is traveling, if I have my head facing the front and you are speaking to me from the side, the sound waves from you are going to hit my one ear of mine a split second before they hit the other ear.
Right.
Okay.
Because there's the rest of you in between the two ears.
There's 6 inches of ugly fat between. What do you use your head for? To keep your ears apart?
So it's just the fact that there's a time sequence in which one ear hears a millisecond ahead of the other.
Yep. And that is one cue that tells these little pair of nuclei. They're called they're little gray areas inside of your brain stem. Your brain stem is your spinal cord inside your skull.
Okay.
Okay, your spinal cord goes from the top, from your rear end all the way up to your brain.
Right.
And where it enters the skull through that hole, once it gets into your skull, it's called the brain stem. And
Right.
of course, on top of the brain stem is your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Now, your brain stem is your primitive brain. It's your old, in quotes, your evolutionary ancient brain.
Okay.
It controls heartbeat, respiration, body temperature, all these, really, really important little things.
And that we consider involuntary.
Yes.
But
yeah.
there is a control
There
for
is
that stuff.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
It's about as thick as my pinky or a pencil, and without it, of course, you're dead.
Mhm.
So it
Right.
matters. Anyway, inside your brain stem, you've got a whole bunch of little, what they call nuclei, little gray areas inside. But a pair of these is called your superior olivary complex. Now,
Okay.
they don't have pimentos. They're not green, and they don't have little red pimentos in them, but they're tiny little pairs of. Anyway, those little pair of nuclei, they compare the time of arrival of sound to your ears.
Interesting.
And they
And
also
that allows you to distinguish a nanosecond,
Yep.
one
Yep.
before the other, and
Yep.
and that forces you to turn your head.
Yeah, that's what's going to tell you to turn your head to the left or right. Another
And we do that as an involuntary. We think of that as an involuntary reaction. We don't process it. We just turn in the direction of the noise.
Exactly, it's a reflex.
Right.
Reflexes are handled by the brain stem and spinal cord. Reflexes aren't sitting there going, now my hand was on that hot stove. Do you think I should remove that?
Right, exactly, yeah.
You're snapping that back, and that message doesn't even reach your cortex.
Sure,
You're
sure.
just like, hey,
Yeah, right.
And another cue that little pair of nuclei uses is tiny intensity, loudness differences between
Okay.
the ears. So again, if I'm facing the front and you're speaking to me from the side, my one ear is going to hear the sound of your voice a little bit louder than the other ear.
Sure, of course, yeah.
And that is also a cue that brain stem will use to help me tell which way to snap my head. So, and it's interesting, if you look at the animal kingdom, The animal kingdom, elephants emit really low frequencies.
Well, they sure do.
They're really low frequent and low pitch bass sound waves are really long. Like they're at least as long as this room.
And whales do the same noises,
whales
don't they?
And long low pitch sound waves are really long, and you know, they bend around trees, over rocks, down into the next valley, and that's how trains of elephants know where each other is.
Just by these low level sound waves.
Zoologists figured this out not that long ago. But that's how elephants track each other's movements, and you'll even see it from a plane, parallel walking, you know, like, and they know because they're emitting subsonic sound waves. Now, bats, on the other hand, emit high pitches.
Right, right.
And high pitches don't bend. High pitches bounce.
Right, that's like sonar, isn't it? Yes,
it's exactly. Bats are using sonar to catch bugs at night. So highs bounce, lows bend. So the low pitches will bend around my head. So the cue is tiny time differences of arrival.
Right.
That's how I localize low pitches.
Right.
High pitches, they're such short sound waves, they don't bend around my head, so I can't use the timing cue. I have to use a different cue, and that cue is the intensity.
Okay,
Tiny
noise.
Intensity differences.
Right, right.
So high pitches, they bounce off my head, but they won't bend around. So I can't use the time of arrival cue. I have to use a different cue, and that is intensity. So the high pitches of your voice are a little bit louder to this ear than they would be to that ear. So you're using two sets of cues to localize the direction of sounds.
On this episode of Boomer Life, we're talking with audiologist Dr. Ted Venema from NextGen and Mainland Hearing Centers, who posed the question at the beginning of the show, why do we have two ears? The answer has only been partially given. We'll take a quick break and come back with lots more. Stay with us right here on CIL 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on CIL 650.